Well, good morning, everybody. Just a quick note before we get started today. This week I got a chance to spend a whole week with my extended family on a vacation. I'm pretty excited about that time I get to spend with them. As such, I'm going to pull back just a bit on the cadence of my weather forecast videos this week. We'll, of course, do the morning videos on Monday. We'll do them on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. But I'm going to pull back on the late night videos where we do the real in-depth dig into the forecast. We'll just resume all of that again next week and just continue to go throughout the rest of our summer toward our harvest time frame. But I will let you know all of my normal resources are fully available. If you look down in the notes below this video, you can have access to all of that. It's free. It's something from Nutrien that we give to all of you. Please take advantage of that while we're kind of pulling back on the cadence here. I really appreciate you giving me that flexibility too. So the map I've been talking over, the one you've been staring at here, looks at the month of June, and it is the total precipitation ranks by climate district. And we just kind of identified those areas in June that got us set up for what we're now looking at in the month of July. And we're going to look at this in terms of temperatures too in just a few moments. Our wettest corridor was right in through here throughout the month of June. Just a lot of flow running up slope, and the storms did not have strong upper level winds to blow them away, so they tended to sit there repeating every day, just delivering tremendous amounts of rain. Remember that time period about 3 weeks ago, no, I guess it was about 2.5 weeks ago, we're stretching from Colorado into Georgia. We had all the severe weather. We had just repeated days of massive hail events, strong winds, and incredibly heavy rains. And for most of the month of June, this large section of the Midwest was very dry. Now, at the very end of June, the pattern began to break. And I'm going to tell you something. When we go back and look, how this fits historically into pattern breaks, I think the big thing that changed was in Texas. I think that was it. The ridge that built into Texas finally built the contrast we needed, both in pressure and temperature, to start to move the flow through the midsection of the country. But I want to point out there are a few areas here and here that have not yet had the major return of moisture. And those are some areas, prime acres in the midsection of this country that are really hurting and need quite a bit more moisture to continue to break this over toward a better look at the second half of this growing season. We're going to come back to what's coming up in the forecast in a few moments, but this is an interesting look at the temperatures first. This map, average temperature ranks by state, so not climate district, but state. And I just want to look again at the month of June. Now, the thing that changed the most for me late June is actually in Texas. And if I were to kind of draw a line, I think I'll draw it like that. Everywhere south of that line in late Texas finally built in some heat. Now, it was extreme heat. Temperatures, as you know, went up to like 110, 115 degrees with overnight lows, in some cases deep into the 80s. But what changed here was that we had spent so much of May and June with cool weather in California. We had cool weather in Texas, and we maintained the cooler weather across so much of the mid-Atlantic, the southeast, and right here into the Appalachian Mountains. But what changed was the ridge built into Texas, bringing in the heat, and that started this pattern shift. I can't blame it on anything else. We didn't have the Bermuda high return. We didn't have the MJO moving around. We didn't have these big climate drivers shoving. And you can make an argument that even El Nino didn't really exert its full force on this pattern. But a ridge built into Texas, and it's what shifted this all around. So what we ended up getting was, over the last 3 days, this is through 6 a.m. this morning, total precipitation here. And it finally delivered storms. And those storms kind of ripped right into the midsection of the country, pulled into New England. We had big storm complexes that blew up here over parts of Texas. We even had storms coming through parts of the Canadian Prairie. This is an area I'm very concerned about, though. The parts of the Canadian Prairie out of Montana here into North and South Dakota. And if we take this same map and just lop off, everything below 1/2 of an inch, we can see the significance of some of the rains pulling through some of these very dry acres in parts of Iowa, Missouri, getting back into Nebraska, Kansas, and then Illinois, Indiana. I mean, just take a look at the Eastern Corn Belt here. We can then add to this the previous day. So this is a 7-day precipitation map. But again, I'm looking for the holes. And there's one there, and there's another one here. And these are areas that need to start to get filled in, because when you look at that in contrast to the previous 30 days, we now understand that there are still some spots that need to have the drought filled in. And maybe it's this map that looks at it and shows you the best example of where these areas are. It's a 30-day percent of normal map. and this one goes through Sunday. It's always got a 1-day lag on it. So I'm just identifying these quadrants right in through here and down along the Gulf Coast that have been exceptionally dry, large areas. So we need to see in the forecast if we're going to be capable of filling these particular areas in. Now, in Arizona, we would normally be waiting on the development of the summer monsoon, which does happen in the month of July. We have concerns over the development of that. We know that there's heat coming into California. It's been in California. There's still some very warm conditions here, but they're relatively short-lived. You'll see that in a few moments. And do note how we are drier in parts of like the Columbia Basin, getting into central Oregon and along the coast. So I don't mean to ignore these areas while I've been watching this drought that's been in the midsection of the country, but we're watching all of it carefully as we go forward. So here it is. Now get yourself oriented because I kind of got the map shifted a bit north. This is the big low we're going to be watching this week that's going to influence our temperature and precipitation pattern. It was pretty well resolved in the forecasts last week too. But I do want you to see this. Across the northern latitudes, like here, between Greenland, and Scandinavia, here, sitting over the Arctic, and here, over parts of the Bering Sea, there are 3 broad areas of lower atmospheric pressure. And what this is important about, why we're looking at this so carefully, is these 3 areas of low pressure are actually helping, in contrast to some of our subtropical high pressure areas, to just bring flow right into the midsection of the United States. Now, as that happens, this front from that low that's curling up north of Lake Winnipeg drops a front right in through here. So we have the risk of severe weather here today. We have the risk of severe weather in the Carolinas all the way up to New Jersey today. Going into tomorrow, you can see that risk area along that main frontal boundary here is going to go from Colorado clear to the UP of Michigan. And then as we get into the day here on the 5th, we're going to watch that front continue to sag. And there's some very cold air that's coming in behind this for this time of year. So that's going to be our trigger. It's going to use whatever available moisture is in place combined with the just much, much better upper level flow to initiate storms in these areas. So 3 days this week, first 3 days of this week, have those 3 areas we're watching for severe storms. Now, the high-res NAM, again, the model is just going to convect. It's going to make storms. And as it does so, we're going to try to see if we can get a sense as to where they're going to be. So look at this. It appears that there's going to be a lot of just pop-up showers and thunderstorms continuing in this whole corridor down into parts of the Mid-South here, into Texas and Oklahoma. But the frontal boundary is what's lingering way back here. So getting into tonight, right there, see this? This is where we're going to keep an eye on the storms maybe late tonight into the overnight hours. But that's not to rule out what's going on here in parts of the mid-Atlantic. And also notice the complexes of storms farther to the south. We then get into the day on Tuesday, playing through Tuesday evening. Again, see the frontal boundary here? Storms are just going to pop along that, but a lot of isolated convective events out ahead of this. This is Tuesday night, playing into the overnight hours on Tuesday, getting into Wednesday. Notice that front is slicing through the Midwest, and as it does so, delivering more rain to one of the very driest areas we had earlier this year into parts of Nebraska, Kansas, and Iowa. And we're going to wait to see by Wednesday if this front, as it comes through, can start to put down some rain into some very dry acres here in parts of southern Wisconsin. Now, along the way, you saw the severe weather risk. We're going to keep an eye on that as well. But bigger picture, this is what the next 7 days looks like from the WPC. Now, the areas that I'm getting concerned about are right in through here. There's been a lot of dry weather in the last month in parts of the Canadian prairie. There's been isolated storms, but we continue to see that in the next 7 days, this area stays drier. This starts to open up here into the northern plains as well. We do see, unfortunately, drier risks in some of these areas that we need to bring in some more moisture. But if we can get this to cascade through this area, that would be great to bring in that extra moisture into that area that's been dry. Continue to stay wet in New England, wet here along the the East Coast, down from the Mid-Atlantic through the Carolinas. Texas, isolated convection, but overall we're in a drier pattern. Okay, let's go ahead and look at this on the ECMWF. There's the low we're going to keep an eye on. Here's one here. There's the frontal boundary stretched right into this area. So again, playing through tonight, that's where we're going to watch for our strong to severe storms, and then here along the front. So going into Tuesday, Front dives in there. This is overnight Tuesday into Wednesday morning, Wednesday afternoon and evening. A lot of isolated convection here. This is just the normal southeast to the mid-south daily thunderstorm activity. There's the front by 7 p.m. on Wednesday. That comes sliding through. Behind it, high pressure, cooler conditions. This is through Friday. That's where the front extends. And then as we get out here into the weekend, we're going to watch on the tail end of that front the potential for another weak low to develop in this area. This is Saturday going into Saturday night and eventually into Sunday morning. And that could pass right over the top. Look at this. That system this weekend could go right over Iowa, could go over Minnesota, could go over Wisconsin, Illinois, could hit Michigan, Indiana, Ohio. I mean, that would be critical rains right there coming through. But do you see what's going on behind this? See this next front here? We just continue to see these larger ridges flank North America, one here and one here, dropping in some colder air into this region. And I'll show you that in a few seconds, but let me just give you a quick update on the models and their total precip. So this is from the European model, 0Z run, 7-day total precipitation. And this is from the GFS. So we see some similarities, but the bigger difference is, the GFS being lower resolution versus the Euro. The Euro is trying to put down a lot more precipitation than the GFS is in certain places here, okay? But what we need to do is look at this in terms of probability. That is the chance of getting an inch in the next 10 days. Wettest in New England, wettest along the coast here, but this is a large area that has a high probability of grabbing at least another inch of rainfall in the next 10 days. Those drier spots that I want to just keep a very close eye on, right in through here, into Texas, New Mexico, and then the west. If we look out there at this pattern, though, just look. This is by July 13th. There's ridging here. There's some ridging here and there. So this flow is coming over the top of this, but it's picked up momentum. This is where our heat's going to primarily stay. But a lot of colder air is going to come in on the back side of this, and we're just not going to see sustained hot temperatures in this section of the country. You could make an argument that there is some sense of higher pressure here, but that's not the Bermuda high just yet. We don't have that full moisture pump into place here. But this is cooler weather around the Great Lakes, and in July, instead of this being convergent flow that's dry, this type of flow means storms. And that's why that northwest flow is shown up. Look at all the models. Wetter, wetter, and wetter. What I'll watch is this. And down here. These are the two areas I'm most concerned about being drier, much drier than normal. Okay, temperature side of this. Take a look at today's highs, because this is not going to look like this once I get past today. Here's today's highs on Monday. Tuesday, the front's dropping down. There it is by Wednesday. July the 5th, 60s and 70s here in the midsection of the country. Upper 90s in the Pacific Northwest. You're very close to that large ridge here. We then go from this to Thursday and to Friday. Look at this cooler air that's invading this midsection of the country. And then we get into Saturday and Sunday. Can you see the contrast is still here, though? Where our heat stays versus where our cooler weather is, the flow continues. And it's that pickup of the flow that we did not have in May and June that's just changed everything for the midsection of the country. Now, what are the longer-term temperatures going to do? Because if we just look at this in terms of that 5-day sliding window, getting out there day 5 through 10, which parks it right here, we just continue to see a broad section here of the central part of North America, tucked in between a ridge on this side of the country and this side of the country with a ridge there. So the flow comes over the top and down, pops back up here, and that just increases the speed in the upper levels of the atmosphere across the central part of the United States. I play this all the way out there to day 10 through 15, which gets us to July the 18th, and we don't break away to really hot temperatures in this section of the country. Heat picks up along the south, from there to Texas, all the way into the Four Corners states. We're very hot in western Canada, where the ridge is. We're hot in eastern Canada, where the ridge is. But in the middle, that low pressure, the cooler conditions, right in through here. Now, the Climate Prediction Center released a lot of new data last week. They did it on Friday. They always do it at the end of the month. So the first maps I want to show you are the July 15 through 28 maps. These are their week 3, week 4 precipitation maps. You see a similarity here, don't you, in what we just looked at? I do want to make a note here, and I'm just going to put a question mark right in the middle part of the country, because it appears that once we get out there past, I'd say the last week of July, I don't think we're going to stay as wet in this particular area. Nor do I think it's going to stay as cold in that particular area as being shown here by the CPC. And when I say cold, I'm talking about cooler than average. But not only did they update their week 3, week 4, they gave us their final outlook for the month of July in terms of precipitation anomalies, which are shown here. And we also got a new both monthly and seasonal drought outlook. So from July 1 to September 30th, again, the risk of drought maintaining itself here, redeveloping down in this part of Texas, here in parts of the Northwest, but improvement in the drought is expected here, and we've already started to see that. Now again, when I look at all of this, I'm trying to just understand these changes and what really drove them, to where it is. And I got to be honest, that ridge in Texas seems to be the biggest thing. Because if I show you a month's worth of sea surface temperature anomalies, here it's going to restart, there it goes, you're not going to notice, just dramatic changes in the ocean temperature pattern. You could make an argument we built in a lot more warm water here. Maybe that's influencing the ridge in this area. More warm water coming into this part between, the Canadian Maritimes and Greenland. Maybe that's influencing the ridge there. But the negative PMM, that cold water there, still going on. And El Nino just continues to kind of move forward. In fact, our ocean temperatures, they just continue to increase. We're at 0.8 degrees C above average. We expect that to go all the way up to maybe 2 degrees C above average by fall. But, I can't find another catalyst for change other than to tell you what happened in Texas. All right. So to finish this up, I want to show you a 7-day sliding window from the newest European model weekly forecast. So this goes out 45 days. So this would just be the 7 days from the 3rd to the 10th. Now, as we play this forward, I'm sliding through the middle of the month now, and I'm getting out there to the week that will end on July the 28th. Let's stop it right there. There have been some indicators, plus some historical kind of evidence, that we could go over drier in the midsection of the country again at that time frame, the end of July. So this cooler weather that I'm talking about that's been in this region, the wetter weather in here, we do expect that to kind of have an expiration date, possibly around the last week of the month of July. But southeast stays wet. I don't see any break away from this overall, so no drought development in this area. And until this change happens, we're going to expect to see quite a bit of thunderstorm activity in the midsection of the country. One last thing to cover here, and I'll let you go, is I want to just look again at the next 10 days internationally. Now, there's always a ton of things to be talking about here. For example, like the rains coming into Argentina and southern Brazil. Don't forget, we experienced 7 months of drought in parts of Argentina. We're now seeing that they're in winter, better precipitation coming in. But I want to keep an eye on that area right there. That is the North China Plain. We've seen wet weather in the Manchurian Plain, wet weather just along and north of the Yangtze River. But there seems to be a big area right here, and this is a very agriculturally productive region of China that's been continuing to show up dry in the forecast models. And some of the newest satellite data suggests that there is some very low NDVI values here, which would indicate crop health. So we'll just keep watching that and reporting back to you, okay? Thanks for a little extra time this morning. I look forward to talking to you again on Wednesday morning. Until then, have a good one. Thanks.